How is everybody doing today? Welcome back to another episode of The Banker Next Door. I am your host, Dr. Joe Berquist. Today, I'm going to do an episode that I've been waiting a little bit of time to kind of do this. We're going to look at Javier Milei, the president of Argentina, and we're going to take a look at the economic reforms that he's making to the country. And we're going to ask the question, like, how's it going so far? Is it successful? Is it not successful? Is it looking like it might be successful? So we're going to take a look at two articles here today, one from the Wall Street Journal and one from the Epoch Times. And we're going to try to get a sense of what's going on in Argentina because I find it to be an absolutely fascinating situation. But before we jump into the articles, I just want to say something about Argentina's past. So, Argentina, if you go back to the 20th century, at the beginning of the 20th century, Argentina was absolutely one of the most beautiful and wealthiest nations on the face of the earth. Buenos Aires, which is the capital of Argentina, was for a long time considered the Paris of South America because that's how beautiful of a city it was because of its grandeur, its architecture, its decadence, an absolutely beautiful, gorgeous place. And Argentina was basically like that for the most part of the 20th century until starting around the 1970s. And then, unfortunately, the country took a giant lurch toward socialism and had some really horrible leaders. And basically, the economics of socialism basically took the country right into the proverbial toilet, if you will. So now we fast forward to around, 2021, 2022, and we have this Javier Milei comes on the scene, and absolutely one of the most colorful characters that we have seen in a long time in world politics, for sure. Obviously, he has kind of a no holds barred style, running around with the chainsaw because he's just going to cut, everything. So I find it to be highly entertaining. But like I said, let's get into a couple of these articles here. So the first one from the Wall Street Journal: how Javier Milei's tough remake of Argentina made him a MAGA hero. 1 year in, El Loco is curbing public spending, slashing red tape, and offering his services to Donald Trump. So in Buenos Aires, so before Javier Milei became president, Argentina gave some government workers a guarantee that upon death, their children got their jobs, i.e. the socialism. Vegetable stands received a bonus if they sold what the government considered normal potatoes, and dinners were strongly discouraged from putting tips on, diners were strongly discouraged from putting tips on their credit cards, causing them to leave wads of inflation-hit cash for a gratuity. Those regulations and hundreds of others are now gone. A year into his term, the self-described anarcho-capitalist who rules Argentina has taken a chainsaw to the red tape and unchecked public spending he inherited from a Peronist administration that left the economy in ruins. Milei's accomplishments have turned him into a star among the ascendant global right, from President Trump to Italian Prime Minister Giorgiana Meloni. Known here as El Loco, the madman, Milei has become especially close with Elon Musk during a more than year-long bromance as the two men laud each other's achievements and attack progressive ideals. Argentina has so far cut more than 900 regulations. Milei said Monday after attending Trump's inauguration at a black tie gala, rapturous crowds chanted his name and conservatives took selfies with the wild-haired leader with Wolverine-like sideburns. He said his government stands ready to provide advice to Trump and Musk on cutting red tape in the U.S. In Argentina, Milei slashed real public spending by 30% and fired 36,000 public workers. He shut down the Ministry of Women, Genders and Diversity, halted most public works, sharply curbed pensions, and sliced subsidies, among other things, provided Argentines with nearly free electricity. This is a fight against the status quo, said Federico Sturzenegger, a 58-year-old former Harvard University economist Milei tapped as his deregulation czar. The cost cutting resulted in a rare fiscal surplus and brought down inflation from 26% a month in December of 2023 when Milei took office to only 2.7% a year later. It's kind of a weird to say. So basically, it took inflation down from 26% when he took office to only 2.7% a month a year later. The economy is expected to grow 5% this year after contracting 2.8% in 2024. In other words, having negative growth in 2024, according to the International Monetary Fund. With millions of Argentines reeling under his cutbacks and austerity, Milei is now under pressure to get people back to work. His aides believe the solution lies in making it easier for companies to invest in a nation. The Heritage Foundation think tank last year ranked 145th in terms of economic freedom, just ahead of Pakistan. Argentina is full of restrictions and red tape, so removing those things is critical to getting the economy going, said Martin Castellano, chief Latin American economist at the Institute of International Finance, a banking industry research group. It is critical as stabilizing the macroeconomic conditions. So, and then we see here Argentina's accumulated fiscal balance as a percentage of GDP. Basically, or 2024, and you could see here 2019, 2020, 2023, 2021, not doing good, negative growth, and then finally got some positive growth here starting in 24. Few countries have built up such a vast welfare and regulatory state in the past century as Argentina, where a succession of populist leaders expanded taxes and bureaucracy while intervening heavily in the economy. I love how they say populist leaders, not socialist, not borderline communist leaders, but populist leaders. The expansion of economic controls took off as Argentina grappled with the Great Depression and a 1930 military coup. The country's leaders sought to create self-sufficient industries in response to a collapse in farm exports, ramping up the state's control over the economy and implementing a slew of regulations to protect Argentine industries from foreign competition, said historian Daniel Balmaceda. Man, I'm having a wonderful time with names in this article. The process accelerated after World War II under Juan Perón, who nationalized utilities, railways, and grain elevators and expanded welfare services while fueling a more powerful labor movement beholden to him. Milei's immediate predecessor, Alberto Fernandez, and before him, Christiana Kirchner, ramped up money printing to fund state companies while deploying inspectors so supermarkets complied with price controls. Absolutely ridiculous. Even as a once rich economy became persistently volatile, more red tape resulted, as well as decades of economic dysfunction marked by inefficient companies, government overspending that fueled high inflation and corruption. Milei, a 54-year-old libertarian economist, assailed that system for creating what he called a political caste that hurt ordinary Argentines. Milei, who has named his cloned dogs after free market economists, waved around a chainsaw at campaign rallies to symbolize his plans to cut back the state and restore prosperity to a nation whose Parisian-like architecture is a reminder of better times. There's nothing on earth that could put a brake on the strength of the heaven of the chainsaw. Milei told the Wall Street Journal in an interview last month at the presidential palace, "We need to continue with the deregulation agenda." The man in charge of revving up the chainsaw is Sturzenegger, a strapping former central bank chief who Milei refers to as Colossus. Sturzenegger, an MIT-educated economist who wrote his thesis under Paul Krugman and Rudiger Bornsbusch, sorry to hear that, described himself as the plumber of freedom. A leading Argentine economist, he has spent his career moving between academia and posts in center-right governments in Argentina, including as chief economist of the state oil company and president of the central bank. He has written textbooks on macroeconomics and conducted detailed research into exchange rate regimes while consulting for countries from South Africa to Afghanistan. It was at Harvard during his spare time from teaching classes that Sturzenegger began reviewing Argentina's statute book and its tangled regulations. He spent weekends compiling a list of thousands of Byzantine laws, decrees, and codes that economists say suffocated business, drove wasteful spending, or didn't make much sense. He recalled doubting his work would ever be implemented, believing it might instead be published in a book one day. I'm very curious, and honestly, I had a lot of fun, he said in an interview at his office. But you have to have the willingness to dive in and look and read law by law, article by article. There are laws that have like 500 articles. He was motivated by the idea of creating an Argentina where young people could find good jobs instead of leaving for work abroad. I want to grow old with my children here, he said. He asked different industry experts to suggest changes in the statute book. He highlighted problematic regulations by pointing to products that were significantly more expensive here than abroad, blaming the price gap on red tape. If you see medication that costs 8 times more here than in the rest of the world, you know there's a problem, he said. The devil is in the detail. And then here we have another chart here. Argentina's consumer price index changed from a month earlier. And you can see here, we were all the way up to about 26% and now all the way down to about 2.7. So obviously what he's doing definitely seems to be working. And it just goes on to say how they're going to work to cut the red tape. And, because I want to get on to this other article here. But the Argentines and people are, they're getting to be more optimistic. Okay, so now let's go here. Okay, so how Milei's radical reforms turned Argentina's economy around. Milei cut 10 government agencies, fired 34,000 public employees, and cut spending by 30%. And the Trump transition team is taking notice. So on his first anniversary as president of Argentina, Javier Milei announced the initial results of his relentless campaign to cut government spending, eliminate regulations, and pare back the country's administrative state. Today, with pride and hope, I can tell you that we have passed the test of fire, Milei told Argentinians on December 10th. We are leaving the desert, the recession is over, and the country has finally begun to grow. So when Milei took office in November of 2023, Argentina, once one of the world's 10 richest countries, was in a dysfunctional state, having defaulted on its sovereign debt 3 times since 2001. It was on track to do it again. Its annual inflation rate was approaching 200%. Its poverty rate was above 40%. Its growth rate was negative 1.6%. Its fiscal deficit was 15% of GDP, and it was running a chronic trade deficit. Argentinians wanted change and voted the self-proclaimed libertarian into office with the largest majority that a presidential candidate has received since free elections were reinstated in 1983, taking 55.7% of the vote over his opponent, incumbent economic minister Sergio Massa, who received 44.3%. Over the past year, Milei eliminated 10 of Argentina's 18 government ministries, capped the salaries of top bureaucrats, and fired 34,000 public employees, cutting government spending by 30%. After the U.S. election in November, Milei was the first foreign leader to meet with Trump, and members of the incoming Trump administration are tracking Milei's progress. A reasonable formula to fix the U.S. government, Milei-style cuts on steroids. So upon taking office, Milei's administration operated as if it were in a race against time, scrambling to deliver some sign of a brighter future before voters' patience ran out. During his first month in office, Milei issued a mega decree that included 366 regulatory reforms, according to a report by Cato Institute political analyst Ian Vasquez and Human Freedom Index co-author Guillermina Sutter Schneider. By the end of the first year, that had climbed to 672 regulatory reforms enacted, along with the elimination of 331 regulations and the modifications of 341 others. These included actions such as eliminating import licenses and lifting rent controls. These acts ultimately led to a 35% reduction in the price of home appliances and a 20% reduction in the cost of clothing, according to the report, as well as a sharp increase in available rental apartments in Buenos Aires that brought a significant drop in rent prices. Dismantling a centralized system. So when Milei took up residence at the Casa Rosada, the presidential offices, he faced a daunting task: dismantling Argentina's illiberal fascist economic system, a system that has been built up since the 1930s and one in which every activity of individual Argentines is subject to the omnipotent dictates of the state. The president's rhetoric and achievements have put the idea of free markets back on the lips of the chattering classes. Milei, obviously, we said an economist, whatever. Liberalism is a natural form of rebellion against the system, Milei said in a 2023 interview with Tucker Carlson. One of his campaign slogans was "Viva la Libertad," long live freedom. Argentina's extensive system of government control earned it a lowly 159th place out of 165 countries in the Fraser Institute's 2022 Economic Freedom Index, nestled between Iran and Burma. But Milei's campaign against socialism concerns more than economic freedom. Perhaps most important of all, and beyond economics, Mr. Milei has jump-started a cultural shift away from socialist ideals, championing civil society and principles of liberty and personal responsibility. Peter Earle, an economist at the American Institute for Economic Research, told the Epoch Times. His agenda echoes those of former world leaders, including British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who in the 1980s introduced the then radical program of tax cuts, privatization, and deregulation while reforming the country's trade unions and health and education systems. With its sense of urgency, Milei's program is also reminiscent of the program of many former Soviet countries in Europe, which rushed to get market-based democratic structures in place while they dismantled esoteric, centrally controlled systems. Devaluing but keeping the peso. So Milei's administration also cut fuel subsidies, halted government infrastructure projects, and devalued the peso by half to bring its official exchange rate in line with market exchange rates. He proposed eliminating Argentina's national currency altogether, replacing it with the U.S. dollar, but he has not done this, jeopardizing his fight against inflation, according to some experts. Milei's Achilles heel will be the peso. Milei won the election because he promised to mothball the central bank and the peso. He has failed to do so while also leaving capital controls in place. If Milei would have dollarized, as he promised to do on day one, inflation would now be dead as a doornail and capital controls would be history. Milei has also worked to reorient Argentina's economy, which he deemed unbalanced, with too much of its GDP coming from government spending and personal consumption, and too little from private investment and exports. He appears to be succeeding in this, turning the country's trade deficit into a trade surplus this year. Argentina is rich in commodities such as lithium and copper, which are essential to building electric batteries and transmission lines for electric grids, and has abundant fertile lands for agriculture, according to the World Bank. Yes, it does. And then it talks about basically emerging from the painful transition, and then lessons from the Trump administration, and that's basically it. So again, I find all this very interesting, and I think a lot of people would be very interested to learn that, you know, Milei actually views himself as a classical liberal. He definitely does not view himself as like a conservative or a Republican, and he uses this term anarcho-capitalist. You know what I mean? Like a capitalist that you know, wants to get rid of, I guess, the chaos or the system, that you will, that the esoteric system of controls that have basically come up. And but I think he wants to ultimately free capitalism, so to speak, get capitalism back out in the open and get it rolling again throughout Argentina. Now, he certainly has a lot to work with, as we said in the article, and as I alluded to at the beginning. I mean, Argentina is rich in resources. They have great farmland. They have lithium. They have copper. They have a whole bunch of stuff down there in that country. So they have a lot of stuff to work with. If he could just kind of continue on his path, I think he's doing a great job so far. He's got the inflation way down. He's got government spending way down. He's got them back to a positive GDP. The cost of a lot of things has come down. You know, the cost of appliances, the cost of rent, a lot of these prices have come way down, and now people can afford to buy stuff again. So now it's just a question of him, continuing this and getting the labor market going now, creating jobs, working on infrastructure, keeping this momentum going and keeping all this going. The more prosperous the country becomes, the more people will buy into these ideals and into these more capitalist deals, these ideas of freedom that he has. So I find this to be a fascinating case. I find this to be a very interesting topic, but as they also said in that last article, he devalued the peso, but he did not go to the dollar. The central bank still remains, and you still have some centralized controls going on there. So, it remains to be seen what is he going to do with that. Will he ultimately get rid of the central bank? Will he continue to keep the peso? Will he get rid of the rest of the government controls that are in place? So we'll have to see. We'll just have to see how that goes on. But like I said, I hope people find this episode interesting. I hope they find this update interesting. I will, but again, probably give this another year, and hopefully next year I'll come back and see how things are going, and we'll report back on this and kind of go from there. But again, hopefully people might have found this a little bit interesting. Just looking again at what Argentina is doing. And, we'll come back and check up on this again in the future. So, but with that, I will wrap up by saying, if you like this episode, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe. That always helps the channel. Remember, we are on YouTube, Rumble, and all major podcast platforms. Please be sure to leave your comments down below, as I always enjoy hearing everybody's thoughts on all these episodes. And make sure to check out some of the other content on the channel. I hope everyone has a great day, and I'll see you again real soon. Thanks a lot.